Between 1866 and 1900, train robbers stole roughly $200 million in today's money. The railroads saw it coming and did nothing. Here's the trick: the railroads weren't powerless, they were profitable. And when you're profitable, you don't spend money on security, you spend it on dividends. The great train robberies of the post-Civil War era weren't crimes of opportunity, they were crimes of accounting. Exhibit 1: the expansion itself. After 1865, American rail mileage exploded. By 1890, the country had built over 160,000 miles of track. That's a network spanning deserts, mountains, and wilderness. Every mile meant one thing: a supply line with almost no law enforcement. The railroads knew this. Exhibit 2: the cargo itself. Railroads didn't just haul grain and timber. They transported payroll, gold shipments, currency, express cars. Those were the real targets. A single express car could carry $100,000 or more. In an era when the average worker earned $500 a year, that's not just money. That's generational wealth moving at 40 miles per hour through open country. Exhibit 3: the security spending. Here's where the accounting gets interesting. Railroad companies could have hired armed guards, they could have built reinforced cars, they could have routed trains differently, sent decoy shipments, anything. But the math didn't work for them. Adding security costs money upfront. Losing one shipment per year, that's just a line item. The James Younger gang, the Doolin-Dalton gang, Black Bart, these weren't criminal geniuses. They were rational actors responding to weak incentives. A gang could hit a train, disappear into the territory, and wait. The railroad would lose the shipment, write it off, and move on. The insurance covered it. The shareholders didn't even notice. Exhibit 4: the law enforcement gap. Local sheriffs had no jurisdiction over interstate routes. Federal marshals existed but were spread thin, sometimes one marshal covering 50,000 square miles. The railroad companies themselves had to hire private security, but only for high-value shipments. Everything else was unguarded. The system had a structural hole and outlaws poured through it. Between 1870 and 1900, there were over 500 documented train robberies. Some sources suggest the real number was higher. The Union Pacific alone reported losing the equivalent of $50 million in today's money across the period. That's not a criminal epidemic. That's a business model that couldn't sustain itself. But here's where the railroad companies finally moved. By the 1890s, losses had accumulated enough that the accounting changed. Shippers demanded better security. Insurance rates climbed. Investors started asking harder questions. The free ride was ending. Exhibit 5: the response. Railroad companies finally invested in armed guards, better locks, reinforced cars, and intelligence networks. They hired former lawmen. They coordinated with Pinkerton detectives. Suddenly, the cost-benefit analysis shifted. Robbing a train became dangerous and less profitable. The robberies didn't stop overnight, but they declined sharply after 1900. What this tells us: the great train robberies weren't a law enforcement failure. They were a capital allocation failure. The railroads made a rational choice, or rather, they made no choice at all. They accepted losses as cheaper than prevention. It took decades and millions in stolen cargo before the numbers forced them to act differently. The outlaws weren't outsmarting the system, they were exploiting it. And the system, the railroads, the insurers, the shareholders were fine with that trade-off until the losses became visible enough to matter. That's not a story about crime, it's a story about how money flows when nobody's paying attention. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. If you want to understand how economic incentives drive history, how accounting shapes behavior, and how systems fail when profit margins matter more than safety, subscribe. There's a new buried story like this every week. Subscribe, there's a new unsolved business story every week. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.